Duke divorced his wife at her mother's funeral, not knowing she carried the heir he always wanted. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The bells tolled for the dead, slow and heavy over the little stone church, and Charlotte Evans stood between two worlds. To her left clustered the people of her childhood, grey-haired farmers, shopkeepers in their Sunday coats, the village women who had watched her grow from a lanky girl to a duchess. To her right rose the black-clad ranks of the nobility, polished boots and discreet jewels, the smooth faces of those who spoke her name in drawing rooms with either envy or disdain. She stood at the head of her mother's coffin, hands clenched around a damp handkerchief, and tried to keep her breathing steady. "Are you well, Your Grace?" whispered Mrs. Allen, her mother's old housekeeper, from just behind her elbow. "I am well," Charlotte lied. "Only tired." Henry Lancaster, Duke of Lancaster, stood on her other side, tall and impeccable, gloved hands resting on the head of his cane. He looked straight ahead at the vicar, his profile carved in stone. To anyone glancing at them, he might have seemed the image of a devoted husband, standing in support of his grieving wife. Charlotte knew better. The vicar spoke of loss of heaven, of the comforts of faith. His voice filled the church like smoke, thick and suffocating. Charlotte heard only fragments. A devoted mother, a generous benefactress, a woman of uncommon resolve. Her throat tightened. That resolve had bargained away Charlotte's future. She remembered her mother at the writing desk, 2 years before, speaking briskly as if they were ordering new curtains and not selling a daughter. "You will be Duchess, Charlotte. Do you understand what that means? Security, position. You won't need to worry if the harvest fails or if the bank calls in loans. The Evans name will be tied to a title older than any factory fortune." Charlotte had been 21 and foolish enough to believe that gratitude could grow into love. She had said quietly, "And His Grace, what does he gain, Mama?" Her mother had not hesitated. "He gains what he needs most. Money to repair his estates and a wife of good character who will give him an heir. It is a fair exchange. You will not find a better." The vicar's voice broke through the memory. "And now we commend her to God's keeping." Charlotte blinked, forcing her eyes back to the present. The coffin waited at the open door, ready to be carried out. The scent of damp stone and faded flowers pressed in on her. Henry leaned slightly toward her, the movement so small it might have been imagined. "Steady yourself," he murmured. "They are watching." She did not look at him. "I am quite steady, Your Grace." He did not answer. The pallbearers lifted the coffin. Charlotte's chest constricted as it passed. The church doors opened to a grey morning, and for a brief moment the light fell across the polished wood, catching the brass nameplate. Mrs. Margaret Evans. Mama. Charlotte followed, one step behind, her black skirts whispering against the flagstones. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. The villagers bowed their heads as the coffin moved past. Among the higher guests, hats dipped with practiced solemnity. "Poor Mrs. Evans," someone murmured softly behind Charlotte. "To think all her careful planning ends in this." "I heard she tied up every penny in that marriage contract," another voice replied. "No wonder the Duke came. He could not let such an investment go unacknowledged." "Shh! They will hear you." Charlotte's fingers tightened around the handkerchief. She kept her gaze fixed on the narrow path to the grave, lined with winter-bare shrubs and damp grass. She had expected Henry to offer his arm. He did not. He walked half a pace ahead, as if she were a distant cousin rather than his wife of almost 3 years. The ceremony at the graveside was brief. The vicar read. The soil thudded dully on the coffin, and Charlotte's vision blurred as the last handful of earth fell. "Goodbye," she whispered. The words slipped out before she could stop it, small and broken. Her mother, who had bargained and calculated and insisted that everything was for Charlotte's good, lay now beyond the reach of all bargains. "She died content," murmured Mrs. Allen behind her. "She knew you were safe, Your Grace." Safe. It was a strange word for the way Charlotte's stomach twisted whenever Henry looked at her with that measuring gaze. When it was over, the guests began to drift back toward the church hall, where a modest collation awaited. Trays of tea and sandwiches, quiet conversation, condolences delivered with varying degrees of sincerity. Henry turned to her at last. "We must receive them," he said. For your mother's sake, she nodded. Of course. He offered his arm this time. She took it because that is what a duchess does, and because without some support, she was not entirely certain her knees would hold. As they walked back, she heard more fragments. Such a shame. No children yet. Perhaps now things will change. The word children hit her like a stone every time. In the first year of their marriage, she had clung to hope. Each month had carried a secret anticipation, a quiet dread. Each disappointment had built a wall between them. By the end of the second year, Henry had ceased to mask his frustration. It is not a personal failing, Charlotte had told him once, voice shaking, sitting on the edge of their marriage bed. Sometimes it simply takes time. Time, Henry had said, standing by the window, staring out at the frost-covered fields. We do not have infinite time, Charlotte. The estate requires an heir. The dukedom requires an heir. That was the understanding. She had not asked whether the understanding had included affection. Now in the church hall, she took her place by the door and accepted the condolences one by one. Lady Ashcombe, Henry's aunt, clicked forward, her black silk rustling. "My dear," Lady Ashcombe said, pressing Charlotte's hand between rings heavy with gems. "You bore yourself very well. Your mother would be proud." "Thank you," Charlotte managed. Lady Ashcombe's eyes slid briefly toward Henry. "You will find, child, that widowhood brings certain freedoms. Perhaps it will be better for you in time." Charlotte frowned. "I am not a widow, ma'am." Lady Ashcombe's smile did not reach her eyes. "No, of course not." She moved on, leaving a faint scent of lavender and something sharper. "Courage," murmured Mrs. Allen behind Charlotte again. "It will soon be over." It did not feel as if anything would ever be over. For nearly an hour they stood. Henry remained by her side, accepting the respectful nods, speaking little. His silence to the casual observer might have seemed dignified grief. To Charlotte, it felt like a waiting storm. At last, the stream of mourners thinned. Only a core of guests remained. Lady Ashcombe, a couple of neighbouring landowners, a portly banker from London who had once called on her mother, several locals who hovered awkwardly near the doorway. Henry spoke in a low voice to his solicitor, Mr. Carter, a thin, careful man with a receding hairline and a stack of papers under his arm. Charlotte watched them from the edge of her vision. The murmuring grew louder, then subsided. Mr. Carter glanced once at her, then quickly away. "Your Grace?" he asked quietly. Henry nodded. Lady Ashcombe, who had just picked up a cup of tea, paused with the saucer in her hand. Her gaze sharpened. Henry stepped away from the wall. The soft conversations around the room faded one by one, as people noticed his movement and instinctively turned. Charlotte felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. "Henry?" she said under her breath. "What are you doing?" He did not answer her. Instead, he looked around at the assembled company, his face composed, his tone even. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "if I may beg a moment of your attention." Every head turned fully now. Cups were set down. Chairs scraped quietly. The porter banker stopped mid-bite of a sandwich. Charlotte's heart began to beat faster. She clasped her hands together to steady them. "This is hardly the time," Lady Ashcombe said under her breath, but not so softly that Charlotte could not hear. Henry ignored her. "We are gathered," he continued, "to pay our respects to Mrs. Evans, who was, in her way, a most determined and practical woman." The choice of words made Charlotte's fingers curl. "Her determination," Henry went on, "extended to the future security of both her daughter and my estates. Many of you are aware that our marriage was facilitated by her negotiations." A murmur rippled through the room. No one in their world was truly ignorant of such matters, but to speak of them so plainly. Charlotte felt cold creep up her spine. "Henry," she whispered, "what are you doing?" He glanced at her just long enough for her to see that his decision was already made, and nothing she said would sway him. "When Mrs. Evans approached me," he said, "the Lancaster estates were in considerable difficulty. My father's mismanagement and certain unwise investments had brought us to the edge. Mrs. Evans offered a solution, her fortune, in return for a title for her daughter and the expectation of an heir to secure both lines." Lady Ashcombe set down her cup with a sharp clink. "Henry," she said louder now, "enough." He held up a hand, silencing her. "The financial terms of the agreement were fulfilled," he said. The Evans fortune stabilized my estates. For that I am not ungrateful. However, he paused. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thinner. However, he repeated, the other essential element of that understanding has not been realized. All eyes slid toward Charlotte. She felt them like touches on bare skin. Her cheeks burned, her throat closed, but she forced herself to lift her head. You refer, she said, her voice clear but shaking, to the fact that we have no child. A few of the older ladies flinched at her bluntness. Henry's jaw tightened. Yes, that is hardly a matter to be discussed here, Charlotte said, on this day of all days. It is precisely because it is this day, Henry replied, that it must be discussed. Mr. Carter shifted his weight, looking as if he would rather be anywhere else. Have you lost all sense of decency? Lady Ashcombe demanded. This is your mother-in-law's funeral. Henry's gaze flicked briefly to his aunt. My decency, aunt, was stretched thin long ago. I am acting now in the interest of clarity. I owe that much to my house and to myself. And to your wife? Charlotte asked quietly. He did not answer directly. Charlotte, he said instead, turning fully to her at last, our marriage was from the beginning an arrangement founded on necessity. I did not pretend otherwise. You did not pretend affection either, she said, but that did not prevent me from hoping. A flicker of something passed across his face, quickly suppressed. The arrangement depended upon certain outcomes, he said. 3 years have passed. There is no heir. The line of Lancaster remains precarious. With Mrs. Evans gone, the financial obligations of the contract are concluded. I am no longer bound to a union that does not fulfill its purpose. For a moment, Charlotte could not make sense of the words. They sounded as if they belonged to someone else's life. I beg your pardon, she said. I have instructed Mr. Carter, Henry said, nodding toward the solicitor, to begin proceedings for a legal separation. The details will be managed with discretion, of course. You will retain a suitable allowance and certain personal effects, but our marriage, as a practical matter, must come to an end. Someone gasped. The banker choked on his tea. The vicar's mouth fell open. Charlotte stared at her husband. Her ears rang. You choose, she said slowly, to inform me of this here. In front of them? Now? Henry's expression did not change. I choose to speak plainly, he said. Rumors will spread regardless. Better they hear the truth directly. Is this truth? Charlotte asked. That you discard your wife like a tenant you no longer require? He exhaled, the first sign of strain. Charlotte, do not be melodramatic. You will be provided for. You will have a house, an income. You will be free from the duties that clearly do not suit you. A low, angry color rose in Lady Ashcombe's cheeks. Have you utterly lost your senses, Henry? You mean to say you intend to cast off your Duchess because she has not yet given you a child? Not solely for that reason, he answered. But it is the principal one, yes. Charlotte heard a soft cry behind her. Mrs. Allen, perhaps. She did not turn, she could not move. Did you consider, Charlotte said, her voice barely above a whisper now, that perhaps I grieved my barrenness more than you ever could? Did you think I did not lie awake at night, counting months, remembering doctors' gentle shrugs? Henry's jaws clenched. I am not indifferent to your feelings. No? A bitter little laugh escaped her. Then what is this? This, he said, his tone flattening, is necessity. I am Duke. The title must continue. I must seek a new wife, one younger, perhaps more likely to fulfill that duty. The words struck like slaps. A younger wife, Charlotte repeated. More likely. Tell me, Your Grace, did you inform my mother, when she signed away her savings and her peace of mind, that if I failed to produce a son on your schedule, I would be set aside like last season's gown? Murmurs rose again. Someone said, This is indecent. Someone else murmured, This is fascinating. Henry's gaze remained steady. Your mother understood the terms perfectly, he said. She was not a fool. No, Charlotte said softly. She was not. The room swayed slightly. Mr. Carter stepped forward, holding out a folded document with visible discomfort. Your Grace, he said, addressing Charlotte now. This is merely an initial outline. Nothing need be signed today. I only... His Grace thought it wisest to present the matter formally while all relevant parties were gathered. All relevant parties? Charlotte repeated. She took the paper mechanically, though the words swam before her eyes. You mean the witnesses to my humiliation? It is not my intention to humiliate you, Henry said. No? Her voice sharpened. Then what do you call standing in the hall where my mother's body lay not an hour ago and informing our neighbors, our tenants, every living soul who ever respected her, that her daughter has failed in her duty and is now, what? Cast off, useless. Faces blurred around her. She heard the vicar mutter, Perhaps we should give them privacy. Henry straightened. I am not imputing blame, he said. Sometimes nature is unkind, but I cannot defy my obligations because you take offense at plain speech. Plain speech, she echoed. Very well. Let us speak plainly. She lifted her chin, drawing in a breath that felt like knives. You chose me, she said, because my mother's money could save your pride. You bedded me carefully, as if performing a duty. When month after month brought no news, you withdrew further, as if my touch burned you. And now, with her safely in the ground and her funds sewn up in your precious acres, you deem me surplus. That is not necessity, Your Grace. That is cowardice. A shocked hush fell. Henry's eyes flashed. You go too far, do I? She answered. I have not gone nearly far enough, but never fear. I have no intention of shrieking in your hall or clinging to your coat-tails. If you wish to dissolve this travesty, do so. I will not beg you to keep me. For a heartbeat, something like regret flickered in his eyes. Then it vanished. I had hoped, he said stiffly, that you would be reasonable. I see now I misjudged. You misjudged everything, she replied. Lady Ashcombe took a step forward, her voice cold. Henry, if you do this, you will not only ruin this poor child, you will disgrace the family. The family, Henry said, will survive. It is for the sake of the family I must act. The family, Charlotte said quietly, is apparently more important than the woman who shared your name. She took another breath. The room seemed to tilt slightly. A light sweat had broken out along her hairline. The edges of her vision darkened. It is only grief, she told herself. Only shock. Well, she said, forcing the word past stiff lips, I will not keep you from your duties. If you intend to replace me, I wish your future bride better fortune than I had. The document in her hand trembled. Henry inclined his head as if they were in a drawing room and she had merely declined a dance. You will receive further communication through Mr. Carter, he said. Arrangements will be made to remove your personal belongings to your mother's house. You may remain there as long as you wish. Generous, she whispered. He looked as if he would say something more. Instead, he turned away, spoke briefly to Mr. Carter, then to Lady Ashcombe, who glared at him as if she scarcely recognized him. Charlotte stood very still. Sound receded, like waves pulling back from shore. People moved. Cups clinked. Someone approached her, saying her name, but the voice seemed to come from very far away. She had the strange sensation that her body was no longer quite her own. Her hands tingled. Her legs felt hollow. Mrs. Allen's hand touched her elbow. Your Grace, you are as pale as paper. Sit down, please, sit down. I am well, Charlotte said automatically. I am... The room swam. The portraits on the walls slid sideways, then righted themselves, then blurred entirely. Somewhere Henry's voice said her name, or perhaps she only imagined it. It hardly mattered. As darkness crept in at the edges of her vision, one thought rose above all the others. She could not remember when she had last bled. Charlotte woke to the smell of vinegar and lavender. Breathe, child, that is it. Deep breaths. Mrs. Allen's lined face swam into view above her. Behind the housekeeper, the ceiling of the church hall glowed dully. The murmur of voices pressed around them like a heavy curtain. What happened? Charlotte whispered. You fainted, Your Grace, Mrs. Allen said. No wonder, with all that was said. Can you sit up? Hands helped her. She found herself on a narrow settee in a side chamber off the hall, the door half closed. Someone had loosened the hooks at her collar. Her head pounded. Henry stood near the door, his back half turned, speaking in a low voice to Mr. Carter. He looked composed again. Of course he did. Lady Ashcombe hovered nearby, fanning herself vigorously with a folded programme. She looked furious. Charlotte swallowed. "I am well," she forced out. "We may return." "You are not going back into that room," Lady Ashcombe said sharply. "Half of them are jackals. They have had their spectacle. That will do." Henry glanced over. "If you are recovered, we can arrange for the carriage to take you back to the house," he said. "There is no need for you to do more today." She stared at him. "How considerate." His mouth tightened. "This serves no purpose, Charlotte. It is done. The sooner we proceed with the practical matters, the better for everyone." Lady Ashcombe turned on him. "You will not speak of practical matters while she is still pale as linen. Have you no feeling?" Henry lifted his chin. "I feel sufficiently, Aunt. That is why I am acting. Delayed decisions have consequences." Mrs. Allen made a sound of disgust. Charlotte pushed herself upright. The room tilted, then steadied. "Very well," she said. "If you wish me gone from your life, let us not delay. When do you intend to throw me out, Your Grace? Before or after I change from mourning?" "Do not say it so," Mrs. Allen whispered. Henry's expression flickered. "No one is throwing you out. You will return to your mother's home. It is hardly exile." "It was my childhood," Charlotte said. "It is now the grave you chose for me before I am dead." Lady Ashcombe stepped closer to her. "Listen to me, child. You need not acquiesce to this. There are ways. We can speak to your lawyers, to mine. We can—" Henry cut in. "You will ruin her further if you insist on a public battle. Do you want that, Aunt? For every drawing room in London to pick apart the details of our private life like scraps on a plate?" "They are picking already," Charlotte said. "You made certain of that." He exhaled. "We will discuss the particulars at home. Not here, not now. Mr. Carter, see that the carriage is readied." "Yes, Your Grace," Mr. Carter said, clearly relieved to have a simple order to follow. Lady Ashcombe lowered her fan. "I will accompany her," she said. "I have no wish to remain among people who think this sort of scene a suitable accompaniment to ham sandwiches." Henry gave a stiff bow. "As you like." He did not offer his arm this time. Mrs. Allen and Lady Ashcombe helped Charlotte to her feet. As they left through a side door to avoid the main hall, voices rose and fell behind them, hungry and excited. Charlotte heard her own name more than once. "Let them talk," Lady Ashcombe muttered. "In a fortnight they will be scandalized by someone else." "Society has the memory of a goldfish." Charlotte said nothing. Every step felt as if it carried her farther away from the person she had been that morning. The air outside was colder now. The carriage waited. Henry had already ridden ahead, apparently unwilling to share a vehicle with the wife he was discarding. Lady Ashcombe helped Charlotte inside and followed, her skirts rustling. As the carriage jolted into motion, Charlotte stared out at the grey sky. "Tell me honestly, Aunt," she said after a moment, "did you know this was coming?" Lady Ashcombe hesitated. "I knew he was restless. I knew he brooded over the lack of an heir. I had heard his men speak of contracts and clauses more than is comfortable. But this, to declare it at a funeral, no, that I did not foresee. For all his faults, I did not think him that clumsy." "Clumsy?" Charlotte repeated. "That seems a thin word." Lady Ashcombe sighed. "Heartless then, foolish, take your pick. I warned him the world is watching. He prefers to pretend he is above it." "He has always preferred that," Charlotte murmured. Mrs. Allen sat opposite, twisting her handkerchief. "You need not return to him," Lady Ashcombe said. "Not even to talk. Let your own people speak for you. You are not without allies." "Am I not?" Charlotte asked softly. "My mother is gone. The Evans fortune is tied to his acres. I own nothing but my clothes and a handful of jewels. What do I stand on, Aunt, if not thin air?" "You stand on your name," Lady Ashcombe said firmly, "and on your character, which is worth more than his title at the moment." Charlotte shook her head. "Names cannot pay servants. Character cannot repair a roof. He knows this. That is why he speaks so boldly." Silence fell for a moment. Mrs. Allen cleared her throat. "If it comes to it, there will always be work for you at the Evans house, Your Grace. It needs a mistress. Your mother kept that place alive with her own hands at times. You have those hands." Charlotte closed her eyes briefly. "Thank you. But I do not think he intends to leave me much choice." They reached the ducal house by late afternoon. The great stone facade loomed, as imposing and indifferent as ever. Inside, the halls were quiet. Most of the staff had already heard. There was a difference in the way they looked at her. More pity, less deference, a hint of distance, as if unlinking themselves from her in their minds. Henry was in the study, speaking again with Mr. Carter. The door stood open. He looked up as she approached. "We will keep this brief," he said. "You should rest." "Your concern is touching," she replied. Mr. Carter held several documents. "Your Grace," he said, addressing Charlotte with a nervous bob, "I have orders to arrange the transfer of your personal effects to the Evans property. His Grace has authorized an allowance, to be paid quarterly. There are also some household items which you may claim as part of your "Not dowry," Henry interrupted. "We both know the funds went directly to the estate, not to her personal account." Mr. Carter flushed. "Yes, of course. I misspoke." Charlotte folded her arms. "How generous will my exile be?" "Hardly exile," Henry said impatiently. "You will have sufficient for comfort, Carter." Mr. Carter cleared his throat. "The proposed allowance is 800 a year, Your Grace." Charlotte blinked. 800. It was not poverty, but it was far from the income one might expect for a duchess cast off in her prime. "And the Evans house?" she asked. "Technically," Mr. Carter said, "the property was entailed to ensure security for you in the event of widowhood. However, given the current proceedings, a portion of the rents will be directed toward maintenance of the house, with some reserved for the estate." "In other words," Charlotte said, "I may live there, but I am not entirely mistress of it." Henry frowned. "You will not want for anything essential." "What about my jewels?" she asked. "The ones Mamma gave me." "Those are yours by right," Henry said at once. "They will be packed with your belongings." "How kind," Lady Ashcombe murmured dryly from the doorway. "One might almost think you were not discarding her like a worn glove." Henry shot his aunt a look. "I will not debate this with you endlessly." "You did not debate it at all with me," she snapped. "Had you sought counsel, I might have prevented you from making such a spectacle of cruelty." "I am not cruel," Henry said, anger flickering. "I am realistic. Our marriage has not worked." "Marriage is not a mechanized loom," Lady Ashcombe said. "You do not kick it to pieces because it squeaks." Charlotte lifted a hand. "Enough, please. I do not have the strength to referee. Just tell me one thing, Your Grace. When must I leave?" Henry's gaze returned to her. For a moment, something like hesitation crossed his face. "As soon as is practical," he said at last. "Within a week, certainly. Carter will coordinate with Mrs. Allen at the Evans house." Charlotte nodded once. "Very well, you shall have your freedom. I shall have my allowance." She turned away without waiting for permission. "Charlotte," Henry said. She paused, hand on the doorframe, but did not look back. "I regret that this has caused you distress," he said, voice clipped. "That was never my intention." She laughed softly. "You intended to dissolve a marriage without distress? That may be the most foolish thing you have said yet." She left the room before he could answer. The next days blurred into packing and small humiliations. Her maid, Jane, folded dresses with red eyes. "Will I be going with you, Your Grace?" she asked timidly. "If you wish," Charlotte said, "but I cannot pay London wages." "I do not care about London wages," Jane said fiercely. "I care about you." Charlotte touched her hand. "Then yes, if your family can spare you, come." Other servants were less brave. Some avoided her. Some offered hurried curtsies and slipped away, afraid to be seen aligning themselves too closely with a woman the Duke had cast off. Lady Ashcombe remained for 2 days, stalking the halls like an angry crow. "He will live to regret this," she said, pacing Charlotte's bedroom while trunks were being strapped. "Mark me. There is no good fortune in treating one's wife as a ledger entry. You will see." "I doubt he will," Charlotte said, folding a shawl. "Men like Henry always find ways to convince themselves they have acted nobly." Lady Ashcombe snorted. "Your tongue has grown sharper." "Circumstances hone it," Charlotte replied. When the morning of her departure came, the house seemed to hold its breath. Henry did not come down to see her off. He sent a note instead, delivered by Mr. Carter. Charlotte broke the seal and read the neat lines. "I trust your journey will be safe and not overly fatiguing. You may instruct the steward at Evans' house to apply to my office for any immediate repairs. I remain, etc." She crumpled the note and dropped it into the empty grate. "So ends the grand romance," she said. Mrs. Allen, who had arrived from the Evans' house the previous day to prepare, looked stricken. I wish your mother had never— Do not, Charlotte said. We cannot rewrite the past, only survive it. The carriage that carried her away from the ducal house was smaller than the one that had brought her there as a bride. No outriders, no trumpeting of her change in rank. Just a discreet coach with plain panels. The trunks on the back looked oddly meagre. Jane sat across from her, hands clasped in her lap. Mrs. Allen rode behind on a farm wagon with a few extra boxes and bundles. As they passed through the gates, Charlotte leaned forward to look back. The house loomed, cold and pale, windows glinting faintly in the weak light. "You will not see me beg to come back," she whispered. "What did you say, Your Grace?" Jane asked. "Nothing," Charlotte said. "Only farewell." The journey to the Evans house took most of the day. The farther they travelled, the sparer the landscape became. Charlotte recognized fields and hedgerows, little lanes she had once raced along as a girl. It felt as if she were travelling backward in time, except that the weight in her chest and the dull ache in her limbs were new. By the time the carriage rolled up the familiar drive, the light was fading. The Evans house stood where it always had, solid and slightly shabby, with ivy clinging to its chimneys. Smoke rose from 2 of the 3 chimneys. Mrs. Allen had done what she could. Charlotte stepped down slowly. Her legs trembled. "It is good to have you home, my lady," Mrs. Allen said, coming up from the wagon. It was the old title before Duchess had slipped onto Charlotte's shoulders like an ill-fitting cloak. "Home," Charlotte said, tasting the word. "Yes." Inside, the hall smelled of beeswax and old wood. Portraits of Evan's ancestors watched her from the walls with mild disapproval. "I thought it best to open only the rooms you will use," Mrs. Allen explained. "The drawing room, your bedchamber, the kitchen, of course. Once we have more staff, we can bring the rest back to life." "More staff?" Charlotte asked. "How many remain?" Mrs. Allen hesitated. 2 maids besides Jane now, a boy in the stables. Old cook, though her knees give her trouble, that is all." She squared her shoulders. "We will manage." Charlotte nodded. "We have managed with less." After a simple supper of bread and broth, Charlotte climbed the familiar stairs to her old room, now hers again. She sank onto the bed and closed her eyes. Her body ached. Her head throbbed dully. And beneath it all there was a persistent, unsettling queasiness that had nothing to do with motion or distress. It had been there on and off for weeks. She had blamed nerves. Morning. Shock. "Your Grace?" Jane's tentative knock sounded. "May I help you undress?" "Yes," Charlotte said. As Jane unlaced her gown, Charlotte caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. The face staring back was paler than she remembered, eyes bruised with dark circles. Her stays, when loosened, revealed a waist that was perhaps not quite as slender as before. Not much, but enough that the bodice had felt tighter lately. "Have I grown stout?" she asked lightly, forcing a smile. Jane blushed. "Not at all, Your Grace. Only you have been tired. And you said you had not been well." "Ah." Charlotte sat in her shift, staring at her reflection. A strange hope stirred, quickly tamped down. "Jane," she said, keeping her tone casual, "have you noticed my health being irregular of late?" Jane shifted. "If you mean your monthly courses, Your Grace." "Yes. I have wondered. I did not like to mention it with all the trouble. I thought perhaps grief might delay things." "How long?" Charlotte asked. Jane bit her lip. "Forgive me, I do not keep exact count. But 2 months, perhaps nearer 3. You were late before your mother took ill, and I thought it was the worry. Then with the funeral and his Grace's behaviour, I did not dare speak. 2 or 3 months." Charlotte's heart thudded painfully. "Fetch Mrs. Allen," she said. "And send someone for Dr. Hughes. No, wait, it is late. Send at dawn. Tell him I feel unwell. That is all." "Yes, Your Grace." Left alone, Charlotte pressed her hands over her face. "Do not be foolish," she told herself. "You have imagined signs before. You have hoped before. Still." The room seemed to tick with possibility. Mrs. Allen came fussed, insisted on hot bricks for the foot of the bed. Charlotte let her. She slept in snatches, dreams breaking over her like choppy waves. The next morning, Dr. Hughes arrived. He was a stout, grey-haired man who had tended half the village and her mother before her. "My dear child," he said, patting her hand as she sat in the chair by her bedroom window. "You have been through an ordeal. No wonder you are pale. They say the Duke made quite a display." "I did not send for you to discuss His Grace," Charlotte said. "I sent for you because I have been faint often. I tire easily, and my courses have not come." He sobered. "For how long?" "Jane thinks 2 months, perhaps more. I lost track when my mother fell ill." He cleared his throat. "Any tenderness? Nausea in the mornings?" "Yes," she said quietly. "Both." He nodded. "Well, let us see." The examination was quick, discreet, as decency allowed. He asked questions, pressed gently here and there, listened to her descriptions. When he stepped back, his expression had softened. "Well?" Charlotte asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "My dear," he said slowly, "one can never be absolutely certain at this stage, but I would wager my best walking stick that you are with child." The words hung in the air. "With child?" she repeated. "Indeed," he said. "I would guess you are nearly 3 months along, perhaps a little less. Given the dates you mentioned, there is no question as to the father." "Henry." Her heart leaped, then crashed. She gripped the arms of the chair. "You are certain? As certain as a man in my profession ever dares to be before we see more obvious signs," he said gently. "Your color, your pulse, the absence of your courses, the queasiness, all point in the same direction. And your figure," he coughed. "Well? A trained eye notices these things." Charlotte laughed once, a thin, incredulous sound. "Forgive me, doctor. I do not mean to mock you. It is only that for 3 years I have waited to hear those words. Now when my husband has just announced to half the county that I am a failed investment—" "Now, the Almighty enjoys irony," Dr. Hughes said dryly. Then his gaze softened. "You are not unhappy about it, I hope." She swallowed. "No, I am terrified, and glad, and angry, all at once." He nodded. "That is understandable." He gave her instructions. Rest, no undue exertion, mild walks, nourishing food. He promised to return in a month to see how she progressed. "Will you inform the Duke?" he asked at the door. "He has a right to know." Charlotte's jaw tightened. He had a right to know how his words would strike me before he spoke them. He chose ignorance. I see no reason to relieve it immediately. Dr. Hughes hesitated. "The child's future may depend on his recognition." "Does the child's health depend on it?" she asked. "No, then he can wait," she said. He bowed, understanding that she would not be moved today. After he left, Charlotte sat alone again, hands folded over her abdomen. There, beneath her palms, lay the heir Henry had demanded, bargained for, thrown in her face as a measure of her worth. He had cast her aside, convinced she was barren, while his child already lived within her. She thought of his calm announcement in the church hall, his careful talk of contracts and obligations fulfilled, his plans to seek a younger bride more likely to give him what he wanted. Heat rose in her chest, not from shame this time, but from something harder. "Your Grace?" Jane's voice came from the doorway. "Is it?" Charlotte looked up at her. "Dr. Hughes believes I am with child." Jane clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes filling. "Oh, Your Grace. Oh, thank God." "Yes," Charlotte said. "Thank God, and curse a Duke." Jane blinked. "What will you do?" Charlotte rose slowly. Her body still felt fragile, but there was a new steadiness in her spine. "I will carry this child," she said. "I will protect it. I will give it the love his father could not be bothered to imagine. And then—" She moved to the small writing desk by the window, where her mother had once drafted the contract that bound her to Henry. The inkstand still bore faint scratches. She laid a hand on the worn wood. "Then," she whispered, more to herself than to Jane, "I will make Henry Lancaster wish he had never opened his mouth in that church. I will make him regret the day he cast us aside." By late spring, the fields around the Evans house had turned green again, and Charlotte's life had settled into a strange, steady rhythm. Morning sickness had faded to a faint queasiness if she moved too quickly. Her gowns no longer buttoned easily, and Jane had let out seams with careful fingers. Charlotte's waistline thickened, her figure softening in ways she had once dreaded and now guarded like treasure. "Stand still, Your Grace, or I shall never get this pinned properly," Jane scolded one morning, a pin between her teeth. "If you keep pinning, I shall have nowhere left to expand." Charlotte said, trying to hold still. Jane stepped back and squinted. You look well. There is colour in your cheeks again. Dr. Hughes will be pleased. I look different, Charlotte said. Mrs. Allen, who had come in with a tray, snorted. You look as a woman ought to look when she carries something worth carrying. That is all. Charlotte pressed a hand lightly to her still subtle curve. He does not yet show much respect for my ribs. It will only get worse, Mrs. Allen said, but there was laughter in her eyes. Come, there is business. Business? Charlotte asked, surprised. What business could I possibly have? The sort your mother dealt with every day, Mrs. Allen replied. Briggs is here about the south field and the broken gate. Someone must decide whether to repair now or after harvest. And old Mrs. Peters wants to know if her rent can be delayed on account of her son breaking his leg and not being able to work. We do not have unlimited funds, my lady. Choices must be made. Charlotte exhaled. Very well. I will speak with Briggs. She had never liked the estate steward much. Mr. Briggs was a thick-set man with a permanent frown and the habit of addressing anyone under a marquess as if they were troublesome schoolchildren. He waited in the small study downstairs, cap in hand. Your Grace, he said, ducking his head without much grace. I mean Mrs. Lancaster, I mean Miss Evans. Begging your pardon, I do not know what we are to call you now. Charlotte fought down a sting. You may call me Lady Charlotte, as before my marriage, she said, or simply my lady, if that is easier. Yes, my lady. He shifted from foot to foot. About the south field. The fence is near rotten in places. The tenants have complained. If we do not repair, the cattle will stray. But the money? Our accounts are not endless, Charlotte finished. I am aware. She sat behind the desk, feeling as if she was sliding into her mother's shadow. The old ledger lay open, columns of numbers marching across the page. She had begun to understand them better in recent weeks, with Mrs. Allen's patient explanations. How much will the repairs cost? She asked. Briggs named a figure. And if we delay? There is risk, he admitted. If a cow breaks through and damages a neighbour's crop, we might be liable, or lose an animal. And Mrs. Peters? Charlotte asked. Mrs. Allen says she wants her rent delayed. Briggs scowled. If we make exceptions, every tenant will cry hardship. Her son will mend. The rent must be paid. How long has she been on this land? Charlotte asked. He sniffed. 20 years, maybe more. Has she ever asked to delay before? He considered. No, my lady. Charlotte looked back at the ledger. Numbers, names, lives. We will repair the fence, she said, but not with the most expensive timber. Speak with the carpenter about a modest solution that will hold a few years, and we will grant Mrs. Peters 3 months' grace. Make it clear this is for her long faithfulness, not a precedent. Briggs opened his mouth, then closed it. As you wish, my lady. Is there anything else? She asked. He hesitated. Only that folks are talking. They see you out walking with your hand to your back and Miss Jane adjusting your gowns. They are not blind. They wonder if there is news. Charlotte's fingers tightened on the quill. And what do you tell them? I say it is no business of theirs, he answered. But gossip will travel. Some already say the Duke is a fool. Then in this the village shows more sense than London, she said. If anyone asks again, you may tell them that my health is my own affair. There will be a time for news. It is not now. Yes, my lady. Briggs shifted again. He will regret it, you know. The Duke. Men like that usually do when it is too late. Perhaps, Charlotte said. You may go, Mr. Briggs. When he had left, Mrs. Allen shut the door softly. You did well, she said. Your mother would have been proud. Charlotte let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. I only hope I have not ruined us by being too generous. You weighed hearts and purses together, Mrs. Allen said. That is all anyone can do. As spring turned toward summer, Charlotte walked the small estate often. The villagers greeted her with a mixture of curiosity and warmth. She stopped to ask after old back injuries, troublesome sons, and failing roofs. It felt strange and grounding at once, to speak of cows and hay instead of silk orders and opera tickets. One afternoon, as she rested on a bench beneath a hawthorn tree, she felt a flutter low in her abdomen. She froze. Then it came again. A light, insistent tap. Her breath caught. Oh, she whispered. You are impatient already. She pressed her palm more firmly against the fabric of her gown. Be still, little one. There is time. We will need all of it. Jane, who had been gathering wildflowers a few yards away, hurried over. Your Grace, are you in pain? No, Charlotte said, just surprised. He moved. Jane's eyes widened. Truly? Yes. Charlotte smiled, a small, tremulous smile that felt new. He wanted me to know he is there. He, Jane repeated. You are certain it is a boy? I do not know, Charlotte admitted, but your mistress is confident, and I am learning to trust her. Jane laughed, tears in her eyes. His Grace would be furious to know the first time his heir kicked. You were sitting on an old bench in your mother's garden, not in some grand London parlour. Yes, Charlotte said softly. He would. The thought brought with it a flare of satisfaction. In July, a letter arrived from London. The handwriting on the direction was neat and familiar. Miss Emily Fairford, Charlotte read aloud. My old school friend. She took it to the shade and broke the seal. Dearest Charlotte, you will scold me for believing gossip, but London lives on it, and I cannot help but think of you whenever the name Lancaster is mentioned. Her eyes skimmed down. Henry was in London. Of course he was. His Grace has been seen often at the Harrow's assemblies this season. Lady Lydia Harrow is quite the toast of the town. Young, charming, with a pretty turn at the pianoforte, and an impressive dowry. There is much speculation that the Duke may choose her to replace, well, you know. Emily's pen hesitated there, the line betraying discomfort even in ink. People say he bears his disappointment with admirable calm, Emily went on. They sigh about his tragic first marriage and his need for a fresh start. I cannot tell you how angry it makes me to hear them pity a man who has behaved so abominably, while you are tucked away in the country without so much as a whisper. If I did not fear harming you by stirring your name, I would shout the truth at them all. Charlotte stopped, pressing the paper to her chest before she crumpled it. Admirable calm. A tragic first marriage. She read the words again, quietly this time, letting each syllable settle like a stone in her stomach. What does she say? Mrs. Allen asked, coming in with a basket of mending. That London is as foolish as ever, Charlotte said. She handed Mrs. Allen the letter. The older woman's mouth thinned as she read. Tragic first marriage, indeed, she muttered. Tragic for whom? Charlotte's hand went instinctively to her abdomen. The child stirred again as if in answer. Let them pity him, she said. Sympathy is fickle. Truth is patient. As summer deepened, the swell of her belly became impossible to disguise. Charlotte let the servants and villagers know only what they needed. I am expecting a child, she told Mrs. Peters on a visit, as the old woman poured tea with shaking hands. Please pray that it is born healthy. All else is secondary. Mrs. Peters dabbed at her eyes with her apron. Oh, my lady, if your mother could see you now, she would say her bargain was not so poor after all. Charlotte smiled faintly. Perhaps, though I would have preferred a kinder contract. She did not write to Henry. She refused to imagine his face if he read a letter beginning, I am with child. The temptation clawed at her at night, when the house was quiet, and the ticking of the clock on the mantel sounded like accusation. You could send word, Jane ventured once. He would be bound to acknowledge the babe, if only for the sake of the title. He could acknowledge without remorse, Charlotte said. I want more than that. What more can he give? Jane asked, genuinely puzzled. Regret, Charlotte said softly. And fear. Those, I think, he has never truly felt. Not yet. In early autumn, as the leaves began to tinge, Mr. Carter appeared at the Evans house. He arrived in a neat carriage, stepped down with care and bowed as if the air around him were fragile glass. My lady, he said. Mr. Carter, Charlotte replied. We did not expect the Duke's solicitor today. My apologies for arriving unannounced, he said, hat twisting in his hands. May we speak privately? She led him into the same small study where she had faced Briggs months before. She did not sit behind the desk this time. She took a chair by the window, one hand supporting her back as she lowered herself. Carter's eyes flickered briefly toward her figure. His brows twitched, then smoothed. Tea? She asked coolly. Not for me, thank you, he said. She did not offer again. Well, Mr. Carter, she asked, to what do I owe this visit? Has His Grace discovered that my allowance is a shilling too generous? He flushed. Nothing of the sort, my lady. His Grace remains committed to fulfilling his financial obligations. I am here on another matter. Then say it plainly, she said. I prefer not to play at guessing games. He cleared his throat. There have been murmurs in town. Doubtless you are aware. Servants talk. Local people talk. The impression has arisen that you are indisposed beyond the usual mourning. You mean they think I am with child, Charlotte said. You may use the word. It is not a dirty one. He winced slightly. Quite. His Grace has expressed some concern that, if there were to be misunderstanding, it might position both parties in an awkward posture. He fears scandal, she translated. He fears misinterpretation, Carter corrected weakly. If you were ill, he would wish to know, of course, out of former regard. And if, as some have suggested, you were expecting, he would have to consider what that might mean for the legal proceedings. Timing, legitimacy, and so forth. She leaned back, studying him. Tell me, Mr. Carter, she said. When he stood in that church hall and declared our marriage effectively void before my mother's grave was even fully covered, did he pause to consider how such timing might affect my health? My position. I am merely his solicitor, Carter said. I do not advise on matters of the heart. No, Charlotte said. I suppose not. He reached into his leather case and withdrew a folded document. His Grace has instructed me to present this for your consideration. It is an additional settlement. In exchange for a modest increase in your allowance and assurance of continued residence here, you would agree not to make any public statements which might mischaracterize the nature of your union or impugn his conduct. Charlotte stared at the paper. You wish me to sell my silence, she said. Not silence, Carter said quickly. Discretion, a lady's natural preference for privacy. She laughed, low and incredulous. He discards me in public, allowing every person present to fill in the worst possible details, and now wishes to purchase my promise not to contradict his chosen narrative. Society can be unkind, Carter said. We cannot control every whisper, but we can prevent matters from worsening. Worsening for whom, she asked. He shifted. For both of you. If you were to suggest that His Grace's decision was purely mercenary or lacking justification, people might speak ill of him. He fears that such talk would reflect poorly on you as well. A woman of dignity does not air grievances. A man of dignity does not discard his wife like a worn-out saddle, she snapped. He swallowed. I am not here to argue morality, my lady, only to offer terms. She looked down at the paper. The black letters stared back. If I sign this, she said slowly, and announce nothing, what happens if this child in me is born hale and strong? What happens when someone counts the months and takes an interest? Will His Grace say, ah yes, my former Duchess has provided me with the heir I so desired, and I thank her kindly for it? Or will he allow questions to spread so that my child's name is muddied and my own honor doubted, while he smiles and says he cannot imagine how such confusion arose? Carter's face had grown red or pale, it was hard to tell. Those are grave considerations, he said. I do not presume to speak to them without instruction. Then take this back to him, Charlotte said, pushing the paper toward him with one finger. Tell him I will not sign. My words are mine. My story is mine. He may have my mother's money and my title, but he does not own my tongue. I must warn you, Carter said, recovering a little, that refusal may make further negotiations less generous. Let him be stingy, she said. I have survived worse than a miserly duke. He hesitated. May I ask you one question, my lady? Not as his solicitor, but as an old acquaintance. You may ask, she said. I make no promise to answer. Is it true then, he asked quietly, that you are expecting? She met his gaze. That, Mr. Carter, is one question I reserve the right to leave hanging until it suits me to answer. He nodded, perhaps relieved, perhaps more troubled. I will convey your sentiments, he said. Do, Charlotte replied. After he left, she stood a long time at the window, watching his carriage roll back down the drive. Mrs. Allen came in, eyes sharp. Well? He offered to buy my silence, Charlotte said. I declined. Good, Mrs. Allen said. There is power in words. Do not spend it cheap. That evening, when the house was quiet, Charlotte sat with a blank sheet of paper before her. She wrote no letter. Not yet. but she practiced names. Lancaster, Evans, the Childs. Who will you be? She asked the heir softly. A boy with your father's eyes? A girl with his stubborn chin? The babe answered with a determined shift that took her breath for a moment. You will be exactly yourself, she said. And I will make this world safer for you if I have to set fire to his illusions to do it. In late autumn, another letter arrived from Emily. This time, the writing was cramped with excitement. Dearest Charlotte, I know you have little desire to hear of London fashions, but I must tell you this, for it concerns you, whether you wish it or not. Charlotte felt her chest tighten even before she reached the middle of the page. It is the talk of every drawing-room that His Grace the Duke of Lancaster will host a grand ball at his London house in December, at which he is expected to announce his engagement to Lady Lydia Harrow. Invitations are already whispered about as if they were royal favours. The match is considered brilliant. People say he has finally put the shadow of his first marriage behind him. They speak of that union in such kind terms, as if poor Charlotte were an unfortunate inconvenience, quickly forgotten. Emily's ink had blotted there, as if she had pressed too hard. Forgive me. I am angry on your behalf. I know you have chosen seclusion. I respect that. I only thought you should know what is being done with the name that is yours as much as his. If you ever decide to tell your side, Charlotte, you would not speak into a void. Some of us are listening. Your devoted friend, Emily. Charlotte folded the letter slowly. A ball, she said. Jane looked up from her sewing. Your Grace? His Grace intends to celebrate, Charlotte said. How industrious of him. He wastes no time. She rose, hand pressed to the small of her back. The child had grown heavy, its presence now a constant weight. When is this ball to be? She asked. Does the letter say? Mrs. Allen asked from the doorway. Charlotte unfolded it again. 2 weeks before Christmas, Jane gasped. That is only a month and a half away. You will be quite large by then, Your Grace. Yes, Charlotte said, I will. Mrs. Allen's eyes narrowed. What mischief grows in that clever head? Mischief, Charlotte repeated. No, only justice. Charlotte, Mrs. Allen said warningly, dropping the formality. Do not even think of going near that man. It is one thing to keep your own counsel here. It is another to throw yourself into the jaws of the ton when you are with child. You told me my mother would be proud to see me manage this house, Charlotte said. Would she be proud to see me let that man rewrite our history as if I never existed? As if I were some unfortunate footnote in a success story? Mrs. Allen sighed. Pride is not everything. No, Charlotte said. But truth is something. Jane bit her lip. If you go to London, I will not let you go alone. I would not dream of it, Charlotte said. Someone must hold my arm when I climb stairs. Mrs. Allen threw up her hands. Foolish, stubborn women. I will come as well. Someone must make certain you do not faint dramatically in the middle of his ballroom. I will not faint, Charlotte said. I did that once. It did me no good. She moved to the mantel, where her mother's old brass clock ticked solemnly. Time, she thought. Time and opportunity. He took everything from me on the day I buried my mother, she said quietly. He stood in a room full of witnesses and declared me a failure, a burden, a transaction concluded. Now he intends to stand in another room and present himself as a tragic hero, bravely seeking a second chance. Mrs. Allen said nothing. Jane's needle hung suspended above the fabric. Charlotte looked down at her rounded body, at the gentle swell beneath her hands. I will not burst into his ball screaming, she said. I will not throw myself at him or plead for a place at his side. But I will not allow him to build his new life on a lie either. She lifted her gaze, eyes clear. On the night of his grand ball in London, she would be there, carrying his unborn heir beneath her heart, to tear the veil from his perfect new life. The pains began 3 weeks earlier than Dr. Hughes expected. Charlotte woke in the grey wash before dawn, clutching the sheets, a tight band of pressure cinching low across her back and stomach. Jane, she whispered. Jane. Jane appeared almost at once, hair loose from its braid, eyes wide. Your Grace? Is it time? I do not know, Charlotte said through her teeth, but something is happening. Another wave hit. This one took her breath. Jane flew down the hall. Mrs. Allen, send for Dr. Hughes. Quickly. By the time the doctor arrived, the pains were coming regularly. The small bedchamber became a world of half-heard voices and sharp breaths. "You are early, but not alarmingly so," Dr. Hughes said, rolling up his sleeves. "The child is impatient, much like its grandmamma, I suppose." "Oh God," Charlotte muttered, gripping the bedpost. "Do not compare my child to her when I am in this state. I may never forgive you." He chuckled. "That is the spirit. We shall do well." Hours blurred. Jane's cool hands on her brow. Mrs. Allen's firm instructions. The rough wood of the bedpost under her fingers as she braced against each contraction. "I cannot," she gasped at one point, sweat cooling on her skin. "I cannot do this." "Yes, you can," Mrs. Allen said sharply. "You've done harder things than this. You survived a duke. A baby has better manners." "Babies," Charlotte gritted out, "have very poor timing." "At least this one arrives before you try any of your mad schemes in London," Mrs. Allen replied. "Now breathe." When the final push came, Charlotte thought the world might split apart. Then, as suddenly as the pain crested, it broke. A high, outraged cry filled the room. She collapsed back against the pillows, tears streaming without her permission. "Well?" she whispered. "Is it—" Dr. Hughes was already wiping and wrapping the small, squirming body. "A robust child," he said, his voice oddly choked. "And a son, my lady, a healthy boy." Jane sobbed outright. "A boy, oh, your grace." Mrs. Allen pressed the back of her hand to her mouth and laughed and cried at once. "Oh, my love, you've done it." Dr. Hughes placed the bundle in Charlotte's arms. He was small, so very small, red-faced, fists flailing, eyes screwed tight shut as he protested this new, cold world with every breath in his lungs. Charlotte stared at him, wonder and terror and fierce love crashing over her. "He has his father's nose," she said faintly. "Let us hope he does not inherit his father's disposition," Mrs. Allen said. The baby's crying eased as he settled against her. She bent her head, breathing in the warm, milky scent. "Hello," she whispered. "I am your mother. You are very late and very early all at once. Typical of a Lancaster, I suppose." Dr. Hughes wiped his hands, eyes soft. "I will leave you to rest. I will return tomorrow to see how you fare. But I see no cause for alarm. You are strong, my lady, and so is he." As the day stretched on, exhaustion folded over her. But even through the haze, one thought remained sharp. Henry had a son, and he did not know. On the third day, when her head had cleared enough to think beyond feeding and sleeping, Mrs. Allen broached the subject. "You must tell him," she said. "Whatever else he has done, the man has a right to know he has an heir." Charlotte looked up from the cradle at her bedside where the baby slept, mouth slack. "A right," she repeated. "He has taken so many from me." "This is not about rights alone," Mrs. Allen pressed. "This is about the child, his future, his name." "I will not hide him forever," Charlotte said quietly, "but I will not give Henry the chance to spin this to his liking before I set foot in that ballroom." "You still mean to go?" Mrs. Allen asked. "Yes," Charlotte replied, "more than ever." "You are weak as a kitten," Mrs. Allen said. "You can barely walk across the room. The ball is in 6 weeks. You should be abed, not jouncing over half the country in a carriage." Charlotte traced a finger along her son's cheek. "I have 6 weeks to regain my strength. I will not dance a reel, Mrs. Allen. I only need to stand on my own 2 feet long enough to speak." Jane, sitting near the fire with mending, looked up. "You cannot bring the baby into that crush," she said anxiously. "The noise, the smoke, the people, it is no place for an infant." "I will not," Charlotte said. "He will stay here where he is safe." Mrs. Allen frowned. "If you present your case without him, they will doubt you. If you bring him, they will accuse you of parading him like an exhibit. There is no easy road." "There is one," Charlotte said. "He will not be in the ballroom, but he need not be an ocean away. Dr. Hughes will give me a written statement with the dates of my condition. The midwife can attest. The timing cannot be disputed. If Henry wishes to deny his son, he will have to do so knowing half the county, and a London physician can count to 9. Mrs. Allen shook her head. "You are a terrifying woman, Charlotte Evans." "No," Charlotte said. "I am simply a woman who has nothing left to lose but her fear." The next weeks were a blur of small victories, standing without swaying, walking the length of the hall, going out into the garden for a few minutes of weak winter sun, the baby, Her son grew stronger each day. He latched greedily. He slept in short bursts. He displayed a remarkably determined jaw. "What shall we call him?" Jane asked once, peering into the cradle. "Not Henry," Charlotte said at once. "Never Henry." Mrs. Allen laughed. "Fair enough. Something strong. Your father's name was Thomas." Charlotte tilted her head. "Thomas. Thomas Evans Lancaster." "Evans first?" Mrs. Allen asked, surprised. "For now," Charlotte said, "until his father earns the right to see his name placed before ours." "You mean to ask him for that?" Jane whispered. "I mean to show him the child exists and watch what he chooses to do," Charlotte said. "Names will come later." Dr. Hughes came, examined both mother and child, and nodded approval. "You are determined to go," he said when she told him. "Yes," she answered. "Then I will not waste breath trying to dissuade you," he said. "Instead, I will write the truth as clearly as I can and pray you use it wisely." He sat at her desk, pen scratching, while she fed Thomas by the fire. When he was done, he sanded the page, folded it, and sealed it with his own ring. "This attests to the date at which I first suspected your condition," he said, handing it to her, "to the likely month of conception, to the presence of myself and the midwife at the birth. It is as close to irrefutable as a piece of paper can be." "Thank you," she said. "As your doctor," he said, "I must also tell you that the journey will tire you more than you imagine. Do not be ashamed to lean on others." "I have been leaning all my life," Charlotte said. "Perhaps now I lean in the direction of justice." He shook his head, smiling despite himself. "You sound like a pamphlet writer." The day they left for London, frost silvered the fields. Charlotte kissed Thomas's soft forehead again and again. "He will be fine, Mrs. Allen said, though her own lips trembled. "He will not forget you in 3 days. He will sleep, he will scream. Cook will spoil him. Briggs will pretend not to care, then stand guard like a bull." "I know," Charlotte said, "but the thought of leaving him—" Jane took her hand. "We will be back quickly, Your Grace. Say what you must, stand as you must, then come home to him. Think of it as a raid, not a siege." "Spoken like a general," Charlotte murmured. She left instructions for everything. How many coals to put in the nursery fire, which lullaby soothed him fastest, the particular way he liked to be held when he fussed. At last, there was nothing left to say. "Goodbye, my heart," she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Your mother is going to stir a hornet's nest for your sake. Sleep peacefully and do not learn the word duke until I teach it to you myself." The journey to London was long and uncomfortable. Every jolt of the carriage made her wince, but she gritted her teeth and counted miles like beads. Jane watched her carefully. "You must tell me if you are in pain, Your Grace." "I am always in some pain," Charlotte said. "At least this time there is purpose attached." They arrived on the morning of the ball. London pressed in around them with soot and noise and busy streets. The Lancaster townhouse rose from the line of elegant facades, tall windows gleaming, steps already swept for that evening's parade of guests. But Charlotte did not go there at once. They took rooms in a small but respectable inn in a nearby street. Charlotte lay on the narrow bed for several hours, gathering strength. "Are you certain you can stand through an entire conversation?" Mrs. Allen asked. "If I cannot, I shall lean on a chair," Charlotte said. "I promise I will not collapse on Lady Lydia's silk slippers." Jane adjusted Charlotte's gown as evening approached. It was black, but not the heavy mourning she had worn for her mother. The cut skimmed over her figure. Only an experienced eye would guess how recently she had carried a child. "You look formidable," Jane said softly. "I look like a woman who has seen the inside of too many drawing rooms," Charlotte said. "Perhaps tonight will be my last." Mrs. Allen fastened a simple strand of pearls at her throat. "Remember, you go not as a supplicant, but as a witness." "Witnesses often end up unpopular," Charlotte remarked. "Then you are well prepared," Mrs. Allen replied. The sounds of carriages and horses drifted through the window as the hour of the ball approached. Music, faint and distant, floated from the Lancaster house. Charlotte drew on her cloak. "Stay here," she told Mrs. Allen and Jane. "If I need you, I will send word. There is no sense in all of us walking into that lion's den." "We are coming to the door at least," Mrs. Allen said firmly. "You will not cross that threshold alone." So it was that Charlotte, flanked by her old housekeeper and her maid, stood across the street from the Lancaster townhouse and watched the elite of London sweep up the steps. The house blazed with light. Guests in velvet and jewels flowed inside. Laughter and music spilled out each time the door opened. "At least he spends your mother's money entertaining lavishly," Mrs. Allen muttered. "At least tonight," Charlotte said. "Some of it will be put to better use." She waited until the bulk of the guests had gone in, until the press at the entrance lightened. Then she crossed the street. The footman at the door blinked when he saw her. "Your Grace," he said, startled. "I am no longer that," she replied. "But I am here all the same. Inform His Grace that Charlotte Evans requests a few minutes of his time. He is much engaged," the footman stammered. "Tonight is a special—" "Tonight is precisely the reason I am here," she said. "Kindly deliver the message." He hesitated for only a heartbeat, then stepped aside. Training was a powerful thing. Charlotte stepped into the house. The hall looked the same and utterly different. Branches of candles blazed. Footmen hurried. The strains of a waltz floated down the staircase. Her stomach fluttered, but her steps did not falter. The butler, Mr. Hargreaves, approached. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then his face smoothed into professional blankness. "Madam," he said, bowing, "may I assist you?" "You may inform His Grace that I am here," Charlotte said, "and that if he prefers to avoid a scene, he will see me privately at once. I will wait in his study." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course." He gestured to a footman. "Show Lady Charlotte to the study." It was strange, walking those halls again. The paintings on the walls, the pattern of the carpet, all so intimately familiar and yet belonging now to another life. The study door closed behind her. She stood in the center of the room, hands folded, heart beating hard. She did not wait long. The door opened. Henry stepped in. He looked as she remembered and older at once. The cut of his coat was fashionable, his cravat a precise work of art. But there were new lines at the corners of his mouth, a tightness in his shoulders. "Charlotte," he said, shutting the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" She heard the note beneath the words, "Not welcome, not expected." "Good evening, Your Grace," she said. "I would offer congratulations, but I thought I might reserve them until the end of the night, when you know whether you still desire them. This is not the time," he said in a low voice. "Tonight is important. You should not be in London at all. And yet," she said, "I find myself here. How startling for us both." He moved to the desk, hands braced on the polished wood. "If you have any care for your own reputation, you will return to whatever lodgings you have taken and remain there. The ton is unforgiving. A divorced woman appearing uninvited at her former husband's betrothal ball is frowned upon," she finished. "Yes, I have never seen their frowns stop a man from doing as he pleased. Why should they stop me?" His jaw clenched. "What do you want, Charlotte?" She drew a breath. This was the moment. "I have come," she said evenly, "to inform you that you have a son." He stared at her. "What did you say?" he asked slowly. "A son," she repeated. "Born 3 weeks ago at the Evans house. Healthy, loud, and gifted with a Lancaster stubbornness if ever I saw it." Color drained from his face. "That is impossible." "On the contrary," she said, "it is highly inconvenient for you, but not impossible." He came around the desk, stopping a few feet from her. "If this is some kind of attempt to—" she held up a hand. "Do not insult me by suggesting I would fabricate a child to hold you. You made it abundantly clear you did not wish to be held." He swallowed. "You had no courses for months. You did not think to say something?" "I did faint at my mother's funeral," she said. "If you recall, shortly after you told the assembled company that our marriage was a failed transaction. Forgive me if I did not immediately consider you the first confidant for my suspicions." He flinched. "I went to Dr. Hughes," she went on. "He confirmed my condition. I chose to inform no one beyond the household. I had intended to come tonight heavy with child. Your son had other plans. He arrived early." "This is madness," Henry said, more to himself than to her. Why did he not write to me? Your doctor, the villagers." "He did not because I asked him not to," Charlotte said. "They did not because I pay them, and because my life is my own to direct." Henry raked a hand through his hair, cracks appearing in his control. "Do you have proof?" he demanded. "Beyond your word?" "Yes," she said calmly, "though your child ought to be proof enough." She withdrew the folded document Dr. Hughes had given her from her reticule and handed it to him. His fingers shook slightly as he broke the seal and read, Silence stretched. "The dates," he murmured. "Conception in late winter. Before the funeral, before any of this." "Yes," she said. "It appears I was already carrying what you wanted most when you stood by my mother's coffin and told the world I had failed you." His throat worked. "Is the child... is he truly... He is yours," she said. "No one else has shared my bed these 3 years, in case you wondered." Her voice hardened. "Though I cannot say the same for you." He flushed. "That is uncalled for. So was your public repudiation," she said. "We are both learning difficult lessons tonight." He looked down at the paper again, as if hoping the ink might rearrange itself. "Where is he?" he asked, voice rougher. "The boy. Safe," she said. "At home." "Home," he repeated. "Evan's house." "For now," she said. "Unless you intend to contest even that." He stared at her. "Do you mean to present this to them?" He jerked his head toward the ceiling, where the faint strains of music persisted. "Yes," she said. "I do." His eyes flashed. "Have you thought what that will do? To you? To your name?" "To my name?" she said. "My name is already battered. Thanks to you, I am a tragic first marriage in every parlor gossip. At least this way, they will know I gave you exactly what you claimed I could not." His shoulders sagged. "Charlotte, I did not know." "No," she said. "You did not ask. That is the point." There was a knock at the door. "Your Grace," came Hargreaves's discreet voice. "The orchestra is ready for the announcement. Lady Lydia's parents are in place." Henry closed his eyes briefly. "Tell them I will be delayed," he said. A pause. "Very good, sir." Footsteps retreated. Henry opened his eyes. "I cannot allow you to walk into that ballroom and announce this as if it were some performance." "You cannot allow," she repeated. "You have lost the privilege of allowing or forbidding anything in my life." He took a step closer, desperation creeping in. "At least, let me speak first," he said. "If I am to call off this engagement, and I must in light of this, I would prefer to do it myself before half of London hears that my former wife has arrived with accusations." "You intend to call it off?" she asked, startled despite herself. "What else can I do?" he snapped. "Pursue a new marriage while my heir lies in a country cradle unacknowledged? Even I am not so cold-blooded as that." She held his gaze. "Then we agree on one thing," he exhaled. "Give me 10 minutes. Stay here. I will speak to Lady Lydia and her parents. I will tell the room that I cannot, in honor, proceed tonight. Then, if you still insist on revealing your news to that pack of vultures, I will stand beside you when you do." She blinked. "Beside me?" He looked away. "I have committed enough cowardice in your regard. I will not add more." She studied him. There was something in his face she had not seen in years. Not just calculation, but genuine conflict. "Very well," she said slowly. 10 minutes, no more. If you fail to return, I will proceed alone." He nodded once and left. Those 10 minutes felt longer than labor. Charlotte paced the study, each step measured. She smoothed her skirt. She touched the folded paper in her reticule, as if to reassure herself it was still there. She thought of Thomas's tiny fingers curling around hers. At last, the door opened again. Henry looked shaken, like a man who had walked through a fire and was not yet sure if he had escaped unburned. "It is done," he said. "They are displeased, but they understand that I cannot offer what my conscience will not allow." "Your conscience has awoken," she said quietly. "That is something." "Do not mistake one decent act for absolution," he said. "I do not." She gave a short nod. "Shall we then?" He offered his arm. For a heartbeat she hesitated. Then she placed her hand lightly on his sleeve. They walked together down the corridor toward the ballroom. The music faltered as they entered. Every head turned. The sight of Charlotte, back in the Lancaster house on the Duke's arm, spread through the crowd like a sudden chill. Lady Lydia stood near the dais, color high, her parents rigid beside her. Emily's face flashed in the crowd, pale with shock and fierce curiosity. Henry released Charlotte's arm and stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice carrying over the murmurs, "I must beg your attention for a matter of some importance." The room quieted. "It was my intention tonight," he went on, "to ask for the honor of Lady Lydia Harrow's hand, thereby securing an alliance that would have brought me great advantage. However," he paused, the word hanging. "However, circumstances have arisen which make such an announcement impossible," he said. "Out of respect for Lady Lydia and her family, I have informed them privately. They bear no blame in this. The fault and the change of plan are entirely mine." A ripple went through the crowd. "Many of you know," he continued, his gaze lifting to sweep the room, "that my first marriage ended earlier this year under circumstances I chose to describe as unfortunate. I will not conceal from you that I treated that union more as a contract than as a bond between two souls. That was wrong. I allowed pressure and fear to harden me. Tonight, I must correct at least part of that wrong." He turned slightly, gesturing. "Lady Charlotte," he said. She stepped forward. The whispering swelled, then hushed as she reached his side. Charlotte looked out at the sea of faces, curious, hungry, some sympathetic, some hostile. She drew a breath. "Most of you have heard some version of my story," she said. "The Baron Duchess, the failed arrangement, the unfortunate first wife whose existence is to be glossed over in favor of a brighter second chapter." A few people flinched at her bluntness. "Here is the missing part," she went on, voice steady. "When my husband announced our separation at my mother's funeral, I was already carrying his child." The room seemed to inhale. "That child was born 3 weeks ago," she said. "A son, healthy and lawful, conceived under this man's roof while I still bore his name and shared his bed. Whatever we are to one another now, he is the Duke's heir." Gasps, exclamations. A chair scraped. Lady Lydia's hand flew to her mouth. Her father's jaw clenched. Charlotte lifted her chin. "I do not say this to win back a place in his house," she said. "I have found my own. I do not say it to punish him, though he may feel punished. I say it because my son will not grow up as a shadow or a rumor. He will know that his mother spoke the truth, even when it was inconvenient, and that his father chose his path in full knowledge, not in ignorance." She drew the folded paper from her reticule and handed it to the man nearest the dais, a senior peer with a reputation for fairness. "Here is the testimony of my doctor," she said. "Dates, facts, witnesses. You may read it, or not, as you please. I do not fear scrutiny." The man took it, looking from her to Henry. All eyes turned to the Duke. Henry's face was drawn, but his voice, when he spoke, was firm. "What my former Duchess says is true," he said. "I had not known it until tonight. But I've read the physician's account. The dates admit of only one conclusion. The child is mine. I cast his mother aside without waiting to know. For that, I accept your judgment, whatever it may be." A murmur rose, surprise at his open admission. "I will take steps immediately to recognize the boy as my heir," Henry said, "to secure his place in the succession and his mother's protection. I will not ask you to overlook my failures. I only ask that you do not visit them upon the child." He looked at Charlotte then, and for the first time in years she saw no contempt in his eyes, only weariness, and something like remorse. The music did not resume. Conversations broke out in corners. Some guests pressed forward, eager to offer congratulations or condolences, or venom thinly disguised as sympathy. Charlotte felt suddenly very tired. Emily fought her way to her side. "Charlotte," she whispered, "I could embrace you and shake you at once. You are magnificent and insane. Both seem to go together of late," Charlotte said faintly. "You must sit down," Emily said. "You look pale." Henry stepped closer. "There is a small anteroom," he said quietly. "You may rest there. No one will disturb you unless you wish it." Charlotte hesitated, then nodded. "Very well." Emily took one arm. Henry offered the other. Between them, they guided her out of the ballroom and into a quieter space where the sounds of the ton's uproar dimmed. She sank onto a settee. Emily hovered by the door, ready to fend off intruders. Henry stood a few feet away, hands at his sides, as if uncertain what to do with them. "You have what you wanted," he said at last, his voice low. "They know. The boy's existence is no longer hidden." "Yes," Charlotte said, "I have what I wanted." She leaned her head back and closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she saw Thomas sleeping in his cradle, utterly unaware of the storm his birth had unleashed. "For the first time in a long time," she murmured, "I feel as if the world has been set, if not right, then at least on a more honest tilt." Henry left London before dawn. Charlotte learned it from Emily's hurried letter, which arrived at Evan's house 3 days after the ball. He has vanished from the drawing rooms, Emily wrote. Men say he has gone to the country to see about an heir. Ladies say he has gone to lick his wounds. I suspect the truth lies somewhere between. Take care, my dear. The world is watching now, but you need only watch one man. Charlotte folded the letter and set it aside. I do not care where he licks his wounds, she muttered, so long as he does not spread the mess on my carpet. But even as she said it, the image of his face in the ballroom returned. The shock when she spoke of their son, the steadiness when he admitted the truth in front of everyone who mattered. Will he come here? Jane asked, rocking Thomas's cradle gently with her foot. He will, Mrs. Allen said before Charlotte could answer. A man can ignore a letter. He cannot ignore a child with his own eyes. Charlotte looked at Thomas, sleeping with his fist pressed against his cheek. If he comes, she said quietly, he will find that this house is no longer his to command. 2 days later, the sound of carriage wheels crunched on the gravel outside. Charlotte was in the parlour, Thomas dozing against her shoulder, when Mrs. Allen hurried in. It is him, she said. Charlotte's heart jolted. How do you know? No one else sits a horse like that, Mrs. Allen replied. I have watched that man ride away too many times. Do I look respectable? Charlotte asked, suddenly conscious of milk stains and sleep shadows. You look like a woman who has given a duke what he claimed to want most, Mrs. Allen said. That will do. A knock sounded. Mrs. Allen opened the door. Henry stood on the threshold, hat in hand. He looked different here, stripped of London polish. There was dust on his boots, fatigue in the lines around his eyes. May I come in? He asked. This is not your house, Mrs. Allen said sharply. Charlotte rose, shifting Thomas carefully. It is all right, she said. You may, for a little while. Henry stepped inside and stopped short when he saw the bundle in her arms. For a moment all words left him. Charlotte watched his face as he looked at his son. The astonishment, the uncertainty, the slow dawning tenderness that he tried and failed to hide. Is that, he began. Yes, Charlotte said gently. This is Thomas. Thomas, he repeated, as if testing the weight of it. She came closer, but not too close. Would you like to hold him? Fear flickered across his features. I do not know how. Neither did I, she said. We learn faster than we expect. Sit down. You are less likely to drop him that way. He obeyed without argument, lowering himself carefully into the armchair by the hearth. She placed Thomas in his arms, arranging the small body with practiced hands. Support his head, she instructed. Yes, like that. Thomas shifted, made a small protesting noise, then settled. Henry stared. He is so... He searched for the word. Small. He will not stay so forever, Charlotte said. He seems determined to grow. He eats like a regiment. A faint, incredulous smile touched Henry's mouth. He looks like you, Charlotte lied kindly. Henry shook his head. He has your mouth, and your stubbornness, I suspect, to arrive at the most inconvenient moment possible. Thomas opened his eyes then, dark and unfocused, and made a soft sound that was almost a sigh. Something in Henry's expression broke. I tried to imagine this, he said quietly. All those months when nothing happened, when each disappointment felt like a sentence. I told myself perhaps I was not made for this. That the house, the title, they would go to a cousin and that would be that. And then, Charlotte said, when it might finally have happened, we no longer spoke. He swallowed. I spoke less to you than to my steward, he said. I thought myself so rational, so practical. I thought if the marriage did not fulfill its purpose, I had the right to undo it. I did not stop to ask whether I had ever truly tried to make it more than that. Charlotte leaned against the mantel, watching him. Why did you come, Henry? She asked. You have acknowledged him before the ton. You could send solicitors, deeds, titles. You do not need to see him yourself. He looked up at her. For once, he did not look like a duke. He looked like a man stripped bare. I came because I could not breathe in that house, he said simply. Every room whispered of what I had done. Every servant who bowed to me knew that I had cast aside a woman carrying my child. I stood in the nursery, Charlotte, the one that was prepared years ago. I looked at the empty cradle and felt ashamed, truly ashamed, the way I should have felt at your mother's funeral. He took a breath. I did not know then, he went on. But ignorance is not innocence. I understand that now. Silence settled between them, broken only by Thomas's soft breaths. I have already spoken to my lawyers, Henry said. Papers are being drawn up. Thomas will be recognized formally as my heir. His legitimacy will be registered. He will not have to fight for what is his. Whether you forgive me or not, I will not fail him in that. You could have waited until he was older, Charlotte said, until you were sure. I am sure, Henry said. I do not need a portrait painter to tell me. I see my own sins around his eyes. A small sound escaped her, half laugh, half sob. Do you mean to petition for his custody? She asked, voice low. He went very still. If I did, he said slowly, would you ever look at me again without hatred? No, she said. He nodded. Then I will not. He belongs with you. You know him. I do not. I would visit if you allow it. I would have him spend time at Lancaster when he is older. I would teach him what I can of the duties that will be his, but I will not tear him from you. Not even if the law lets me. She studied him, searching for calculation. I am told, she said quietly, that some of your advisers have already suggested another path, that if you questioned his legitimacy, you might yet marry advantageously without complication. He flinched. Who told you that? Emily heard it in a drawing room, she said, and London airs its laundry quickly. He set his jaw. They did suggest it. They said, if you are not reconciled with her, let the child remain in shadow. Allow doubt to linger. It will make matters easier. And what did you say? She asked. He lifted his head. I told them that if they wished to keep my favor, they would never speak so of my son again. I told them I would rather see the title die than build its future on a lie. I said that if any man in that room dared call you a liar or my boy a bastard, he could meet my eyes and say it to my face. A hot, fierce thrill went through her. You said that? Yes, he said. If I am to be a father, I must be a different man than the one who signed away his wife like a contract. I cannot ask Thomas to respect me if I am not worthy of it. Thomas stirred, eyelids fluttering. Charlotte crossed the room and sat on the edge of the opposite chair. I did not come tonight to demand anything from you, Henry said softly. I know I have no right. You owe me nothing. You have already been more gracious than I deserve by allowing me to see him. I hoped you might see that I am trying to change. I see it, she said. I just do not know if it is enough. He met her gaze. Tell me what enough would look like, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to reach it. She drew in a slow breath. Enough, she said, choosing each word, would be never again hearing you speak of our lives as a calculation. Enough would be you standing beside me not because a contract demands it, but because you cannot imagine standing anywhere else. Enough would be knowing that if we disagree, and we will, you will not retreat into silence and let me freeze alone on my side of the bed. His Adam's apple bobbed. You speak of a bed as if you consider sharing one again. Do not run ahead, she said. I speak of respect, partnership, love. He closed his eyes briefly. I loved you, he said. From the beginning, more than I admitted, even to myself. I did not know how to say it, so I wrapped myself in duty instead. When months went by with no child, I blamed you because I feared to blame myself. When your mother died, all I could see was the corner I had trapped us in. I thought cutting the knot would free us both. I did not realize I was cutting you to pieces. Charlotte's throat tightened. Love is not something you can retroactively declare, she said. You did not behave as if you loved me. I know, he said. That is why I am not asking you to take my word now. I'm asking for time to show you. Time to prove that when I say I love you, it means I will choose you over my own pride, over convenience, over the opinions of every man in my club. He looked down at Thomas, then back at her. I want us to be a family, he said simply. Not a contract, not a scandal. A family. You, me, and this stubborn little creature who has my nose and your courage. She held very still. What if I say no? She asked. What if I say you may visit your son, you may see him, you may teach him, but I will not be your wife again? What then? His answer came without hesitation. Then I will devote myself to being the best father I can, and hope that someday you might change your mind, he said. I will not withdraw support. I will not punish you by withholding from him. I will live with the knowledge that my own folly cost me the chance to walk into old age at your side. Tears stung her eyes. You would accept that? She whispered. No, he said. I would hate it. Every day. But I would accept that it was my doing. Silence stretched, filled with the crackle of the fire and Thomas's soft breathing. Mrs. Allen, who had been very still in the doorway, turned away, wiping her eyes with her apron. Charlotte looked at Henry. Truly looked. The man who had humiliated her at a funeral was still there in the bones of his face, but something had changed behind his eyes. The hard shine of pride was dulled. In its place, she saw uncertainty, humility, hope so fragile it almost hurt to see. "Give him to me," she said, holding out her hands. Henry hesitated only a moment, then transferred Thomas carefully back into her arms. She settled the baby against her shoulder and rose. "Come," she said. "Where?" Henry asked, startled. "To the room where my mother wrote the contract that bound us together," she said. "If anything is to be rebuilt, it might as well start there." He followed her down the hall, like a man going to judgment. The little study was as it had been. The worn desk, the ink-stained blotter, the chair where Mrs. Evans had once sat with a determined set to her jaw. Charlotte stood behind the desk, Thomas cradled in one arm. "Do you remember signing here?" she asked. "Yes," Henry said. "I remember thinking numbers and conditions and timelines. I do not recall thinking about you at all." "Neither did my mother," Charlotte said. "She thought of security, position. She believed love could be built afterward, like stables." Henry flinched. "I'm sorry." "I know," Charlotte said. "That is the beginning, not the end." She shifted Thomas to the crook of one arm and opened a drawer. Inside lay the original contract, folded and yellowing. She took it out and held it up. "This," she said, "is what brought us together." She walked to the small fireplace in the corner and held the paper over the grate. Henry's eyes widened. "Charlotte, do not fear," she said. "Your lawyers have their own copies. This is only the one that lived in my mother's drawer, the one that made me feel like a ledger line." She dropped it into the grate. The paper caught quickly, curling and blackening, words flaring and then vanishing in ash. They watched in silence. When it was done, she turned back to him. "If we are to marry again," she said quietly, "it will not be because of a document signed over a desk. It will be because you ask, as a man, and I answer, as a woman, and we both walk into it with open eyes." He took a step toward her, then another. He stopped just out of reach, as if held back by an invisible line. "Charlotte Evans," he said, voice unsteady. "Will you marry me? Not as Duchess to Duke, not as bargain to be fulfilled, but as yourself. Will you allow me to try every day to earn the love I once wasted? Will you be my wife, my equal, the mother of my heir and of whatever other chaos we may bring into this world together?" Her heart pounded. She thought of the girl who had stood at the altar years before, trembling, hoping for kindness and receiving calculation. She thought of the woman who had stood in a ballroom and told the truth to a crowd that preferred polite lies. She thought of the baby in her arms, the future in his eyes. She stepped forward until she stood close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of Henry's eyes, the faint scar on his chin from a childhood tumble. "You do not make promises of perfection," she said. "Good. I would not believe them. But you promise to try, to change, to put us before your own comfort, to see me. Do you promise that, Henry?" "With everything in me," he said. "And if you fail," she asked softly. "Then I will admit it and ask how to mend it," he said. "I will not hide behind titles again." She looked down at Thomas, who had chosen this moment to yawn extravagantly. "Well, my son," she murmured, "shall we take a risk on your father?" Thomas hiccuped and settled back to sleep. She smiled. "Yes," she said, lifting her eyes to Henry's. "I will marry you. But understand me, Henry Lancaster. I do so because I choose it, not because I must. If ever again you treat me as a convenience instead of a companion, you will wake one day to find that I have taken our son, our dignity, and our peace, and gone back to this house where I have already proved I can survive without you." He let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. "Fair terms," he said hoarsely. "I accept them with gratitude." She shifted Thomas into the crook of one arm and reached up with her free hand. He took it as if it were a relic, lifting her fingers to his lips. The kiss he pressed there was not possessive. It was reverent. "Thank you," he whispered against her skin. "Do not thank me yet," she said, though her voice trembled. "We have not survived the village gossips." They married in the same church where her mother had been buried, and her first marriage had been forged in silence. This time there were no contracts spread in the vestry, no whispered calculations about dowries and debts. The village filled the pews. Mrs. Peters wept openly. Briggs stood stiff and proud at the back. Emily came down from London with eyes shining. Lady Ashcombe wore her best bonnet and dabbed her eyes at intervals, declaring to anyone who would listen that she had always known the boy would come to his senses. Jane, resplendent in a new gown Charlotte had insisted upon, carried Thomas up the aisle for part of the way, before surrendering him to Mrs. Allen, who held him with the air of a general guarding a banner. Charlotte walked alone at first, head high. Halfway down, Henry stepped from his place and came to meet her, offering his arm. She hesitated only a second before taking it. The vicar's words floated over them. Promises, vows. This time Charlotte heard everyone. "Will you love, comfort, honor, and keep him in sickness and in health?" "I will," she said without fear. When Henry's turn came, his voice shook. "Will you love, comfort, honor, and keep her, forsaking all others, and keeping only unto her?" "I will," he said. "God help me, I will." Afterward, outside in the churchyard, the bells ringing not for death but for union, Henry took her aside for a moment of breath between congratulations. "You could have been a duchess anywhere," he said softly. "I am not a duchess," she replied. "I am your wife. There is a difference." He smiled. "I am beginning to understand that." He reached for Thomas, who considered him solemnly and then reached back, grappling clumsily at his cravat. "There," Charlotte said. "He approves of your attire." "High praise," Henry murmured, cradling their son. They returned to Lancaster House as a family, not a transaction. The staff's bows held something new. Respect, not mere duty. The nursery, once an echoing room with unused toys, filled slowly with life. Thomas's first laugh echoed off its walls like a promise. In time, the ton found a new scandal. As Emily had predicted, their attention shifted. Some continued to whisper about the funeral, the ball, the boldness of the Duchess who had refused to disappear. But many, seeing Henry's changed conduct and Charlotte's calm strength, adjusted their stories. People liked to be on the side of a happy ending. On winter evenings, when the fire burned low and snow hushed the world outside, Charlotte would sit with Thomas on a rug before the hearth, while Henry read aloud from papers and reports, occasionally breaking off to make faces at the baby until he squealed. "Who would have thought," Henry said once, lifting Thomas high and making him giggle, "that the best part of being Duke would be crawling on the floor?" Charlotte watched them, warmth spreading through her chest. "Do not let Lady Ashcombe hear you say that," she said. "She will insist on a portrait to commemorate the moment." "She may have it," Henry replied. "I have nothing to hide now." Later that night, when Thomas slept in his cradle and the house had gone quiet, Henry and Charlotte stood together at the window, looking out over the moonlit fields. "I used to think power meant being able to command others," he said, "to bend them to my will. Now I suspect it means admitting when I am wrong and asking how to do better." "Then you are more powerful than any duke I have known," she said. He turned to her, the firelight catching in his eyes. "I love you," he said simply. She smiled, the words no longer strange. "I know," she said, "and this time I believe you." He reached for her then, and she went gladly, their lips meeting in a kiss that was not about duty or desperation, but about choice. It was gentle and fierce at once, filled with all the words they had once left unsaid. His hand at her back held her as if she were both precious and strong. Her fingers curled in his hair, pulling him closer, not to possess, but to share. When they parted, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. "We nearly lost all of this," she whispered. "Yes," he said, "through my own blindness." "And through my silence," she added. "I let others speak for me, until they nearly wrote me out of my own life." He shook his head. "You found your voice when it mattered most." She thought of the church hall, the ballroom, the little study where the old contract had turned to ash. "I suppose I did," she said. He kissed her brow. "And when Thomas is grown and he asks how his parents came together, what will we tell him?" She smiled. "We will tell him that once there was a duke so proud he thought he could weigh a woman's worth on scales," she said, "and a woman who believed for too long that her value lay in what she could give him, and that both were wrong." "And then?" he asked, amused. "And then," she said, resting her hand over his heart. "We will tell him that the day his father lost everything he thought he wanted was the day he began to gain what he truly needed, that his mother learned she was stronger than humiliation. That truth is a sharper sword than any gossip, and that love, when chosen freely by two stubborn people who have seen the worst of each other and stayed, is the only bargain worth making." Henry laughed softly. "He will think us sentimental. He will think us honest," she said. From the cradle, Thomas made a soft sound as if in agreement. Charlotte crossed the room and looked down at him, one hand finding Henry's without conscious thought. They stood there, fingers entwined, watching their son sleep. Outside, the wind moved through the bare branches. Inside, the house breathed with them, a place no longer haunted by contracts and expectations, but warmed by second chances. And in the quiet, Charlotte understood that the vengeance she had once wanted, the vision of Henry brought low and begging, had transformed into something else entirely. She had made him see his own heart. She had made herself see hers. In the end, the true victory was not in watching him suffer, but in watching him choose to be better and allowing herself to love the man who emerged. She squeezed his hand. "We are not the people we were at my mother's funeral," she said softly. "No," he agreed. "We are better." "Then let us raise this child to start where we end," she murmured, knowing his worth, knowing how to love, and never letting anyone tell him that a human heart is a line in a ledger. Henry lifted her hand to his lips again. "Together," he said. "Together," she answered, and for the first time, the word did not feel like a promise made under another's shadow, but like a future they had chosen, with open eyes and full hearts. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you like the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories, full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.